Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Science. In fact, this episode is a new season of biology. In this season, we're looking at systems in action specifically for plants, and later on, we'll look at mammals. It's chapter 4 of your textbook, and in this episode, I want to have a look at how plants and trees in particular are able to transport water and nutrients throughout their bodies. So let's begin. We'll start by looking at the world's tallest trees, and redwoods are a fantastic example of that. You can see the sheer size of the trunk of this tree, and the kids are trying to get their hands around it. Obviously, they're not going to have any chance of hugging the entire tree because it's absolutely massive. And these redwood trees are able to create these majestic forests where these trees stretch really tall into the sky, up to 100 meters straight up. They're amongst the tallest trees in the world. And in fact, we have a redwood forest here in Victoria. It's in Warburton, a couple of hours drive from Melbourne. But if you get a chance to go to Warburton, the redwood forest there, definitely go. It's an amazing experience. Now, just in case you haven't noticed, here is a person down the bottom here. And these trees stretch really tall into the sky. They tower over you. Because they're so tall, it's a strange feeling so small next to such large living trees. You can then go into the forest itself, and inside the forest looks something like this. You'll notice that the trees have been planted in really neat rows and columns, and that's because initially it was planned to use this forest to harvest really high quality redwood timber. But the trees weren't quite growing as efficiently, as quick, or as large as they needed them to, and so instead at the moment it's a tourist attraction. And you can go in there and have a picnic of some sorts anywhere you want. And there's these strange sculptures there that people have built, and you can build as well using some random bits of sticks. I don't do it justice, but you should go there and check it out. It's really, really cool. I've got a few more images here for the time where I went. And here I am in the background, the trees towering over me. The other thing you'll notice when you go to this forest is the strange sensation you feel on your ears. Because this forest sort of muffles the outside world's sound, you're so used to hearing background noise, but when you walk into the forest, the only noise you hear is the gentle rustling of the branches and leaves themselves. All the noise that your ears are normally used to disappears and fades and becomes muffled. It's a strange sensation on your ears, one that I can't describe. You have to go there to experience it yourself. And then you can bring your blanket and have a bit of a picnic in amongst the forest as well. It's a really cool experience. So if you get a chance these holidays, go to the Redwood Forest in Warburton in Victoria. Let's have a look at a few more massive trees. The first one is the Centurion. This is the world's tallest eucalyptus, and it's actually found in southern Tasmania. So you can visit it quite easily if you wanted to. It's nearly 100 meters straight up into the air, which makes it massive, and it was only discovered in 2008, which is a fairly recent discovery. If you want to know more about this particular tree, have a click of this link here after loading up the PowerPoint and have a watch of this video. Let's have a look at the world's tallest tree. This one is a redwood tree, and it's nearly 116 meters tall. It could have actually grown taller, but there's been woodpecker damage up the top, which may have prevented some of its growth. But this is the largest recorded tree in the world at the moment, 600 to 800 years old, it's estimated to be. Pretty cool. The question we have during this episode, though, is how on earth do these trees, especially the massive ones, get water from their roots all the way to the top of their trunks? How do trees transport water up their trunks against gravity? We of course have a heart pumping inside of us, but trees don't have hearts. How do they actually do it? And we're going to be answering that question over a couple of episodes. The other question I like to think about is what's going on underneath the ground? Because you can only see the shoot system of the plant, you can't really see the root system of the plant. And if I come back to this slide here, just imagine having X-ray vision for a moment, being able to see underneath the ground. Can you imagine the complexity of the root systems that's going on underneath the ground here? The roots of each tree are competing for space with each other, trying to find space and grow. It would be an absolute hive of activity going on underneath the ground itself. I wish I could see it, but it's a cool thought. The roots, of course, are used to anchor the plant and also to absorb water and nutrients from the soil. And we'll have a look at that as well during this season of science, season of biology. So the question we have, how do trees transport nutrients and water from their roots to the tops of the plant, to the tops of their trunk? Let's begin. So we call trees and these types of plants vascular plants. We'll also have a look at non-vascular plants as well, but for now we're focusing on vascular plants. We also have a vascular system in the form of arteries and veins and capillaries in which our blood flows through. Trees have a similar vascular system in which water and nutrients are able to flow through. But it is a little bit different to ours. Their vascular tissue has two main conducting tissues. First of which is this cool word here, xylem. Xylem. Xylem tissue transports water and dissolved minerals for solutes like salts to the leaves. And xylem tissue is only able to conduct water in one direction. It only goes up the plant. So it'll go into the roots first, and then it will travel up the plant through the xylem. The outer cells of the xylem are actually not living. They form a really tough, strong exterior to protect the xylem tissue on the inside here. And always keep in mind for xylem, it's just water and dissolved minerals that go up the trunk, up the plant. The other one is phloem. Phloem. Now, phloem tissue conducts sucrose and other nutrients from the leaves to all parts of the plant. So if you can imagine a leaf up the top of the tree, it's undergoing photosynthesis, creating energy for the plant. That plant needs to get that sugar, that sucrose, that energy to the rest of its body. And so phloem allows the transport of those nutrients and sugars both up and down the plant to make sure the roots get some energy to grow as well. Phloem transports organic molecules. It's got these sort of filter plates, these sieve plates that help coordinate the transport of these nutrients. And it's two-way movement, unlike the xylem, which is only one-way movement. The cells are living, but they need external support as well. And we'll have a look at these tissues as we move along this episode. Now, non-vascular plants don't contain these conductive structures. So only vascular plants contain xylem and phloem, whereas non-vascular plants do not have these structures. The question still remains though, how does water travel up the xylem? How does the plant do this? I've got another diagram for you to have a look at here. This xylem vessel is showing that water is transported only in an upward direction, whereas for the phloem tissue, material is able to be transported both ways. Primarily it comes downwards from the leaves to feed the rest of the tree, but it can also flow upwards. Water is able to diffuse in and out through osmosis as well, and it moves between the phloem and the xylem. But once it does move into the xylem, it only moves upwards. When you're taking your notes, I'd like you to make sure that you note down what vascular and non-vascular plants are, and in particular, the vascular tissue that make up vascular plants. So make sure you're noting down this information here, and also provide next to your notes or underneath your notes some kind of diagram. You can use this diagram, or you can use this diagram here. Let's have a look at a microscope image of these vascular tissues. So this here, you've cut a stem through the middle, across going like that, and in the middle of it, you can see the vascular tissue, the vascular bundles. We've got a xylem here and a phloem here, and you can see these structures underneath the microscope as well. If you'd like to do an activity on water transport, there's a really simple one. You can grab a couple of celery sticks and put them in water that you've added food coloring to. And you're able to actually observe the colored water moving up the xylem to the leaves of the celery stick, and actually changes the color of the celery stick themselves. So if you'd like to do this for yourself, it's a really interesting, nice, easy activity you can do for yourselves at home. Once the water has moved up the celery stick, you can grab a knife and cut it in half, and you can actually see the colored vascular bundles, the colored xylem of the celery stick themselves. It's a really nice activity to do if you're interested. Let's have a look at a couple of examples of non-vascular plants. So liverwort, hornwort, and moss, these plants are small enough where diffusion is enough to sustain them. Diffusion is enough to sustain them because they are much smaller plants. And so they don't need the complex vascular systems that a much larger plant like a tree requires. It's still begging the question though, how do plants move water up their massive stems and trunks? Well, let's come to properties of water. So this is the first step as to how water is able to move up a trunk of a tree. First one is cohesion. Now cohesion refers to the fact that water sticks to itself very easily. Water is sticky. That's what creates surface tension. It likes to stick to itself. Another property is adhesion. It refers to the fact that water likes to stick well to other things. Now I've got another little activity that you could do at home if you wish. If you've got a pipette dropper or some kind of dropper where you can create drops of water consistently, you can play a little bit of a game with yourself where you compete with yourself or with a friend how many drops of water you can fit onto a 5-cent piece. Now first use tap water, and then you can try using salty water, and then you can try using sugary water to see if the number of drops you can fit onto a 5-cent piece changes, whether it's just normal tap water, sugary water, or salty water. It's an interesting experiment, interesting activity to do. Now keep these properties of water in the back of your mind. They'll come into play a little bit later on. So water likes to stick to itself, and it likes to stick to other objects. You might have already seen this from your personal experience in the form of a meniscus when you're measuring water in a measuring cylinder. This meniscus is a curvature of water within the tube itself, and it happens because the water likes to stick to the outsides of the measuring cylinder itself. And so because it's sticking to the outside walls, it creates this strange meniscus effect. Now, you can actually model this meniscus effect. In class, we would run with this activity together, but the end result of the activity produces something like this, where the thinner the tube, the higher the water is able to climb up the tube. Now, this is referring to an effect called capillarity. Now, for capillarity, I like for you to do your own little research as to what capillarity means, and make sure that you take a note of its definition. Because water likes to stick to itself, as it climbs up this tube, it pulls up the water behind it, kind of like a chain link. As the top of the water stream moves up, because the water is sticky to itself, it pulls up the rest of the water up with it. This is known as capillarity, and the thinner the tube, the higher the water is going to climb up the tube. That's known as capillarity. There's a third effect which I'm going to go into in the next episode, and that is when the sun is evaporating water from the tops of the trees. Because water likes to stick to itself, it pulls water underneath it upwards through the tree. And it's all of these factors, all of these properties of water that allow water to climb up the tubes, the very microscopic xylem. When you are taking your notes for today, I'd like you to note down what we've covered so far. So the vascular tissue inside of plants starting here. So this slide is very important to you, making sure that you use a diagram with your notes as well. The activities that I've covered are optional, but I do encourage you to undergo some activities just to still make the classes interesting for yourself. Ensure that you understand what a meniscus is. It will be important to the upcoming experiment. And ensure you've taken note of what capillarity is. It's important in terms of the physics and how water is able to climb up the xylem of vascular plants. This brings us to the end of this particular episode, and so I'd like you to take notes from this PowerPoint. Have a look at your Jacaranda textbook page 179 to 180 and take a couple of notes from Jacaranda as well. And then I'd like you to complete Biozone pages 88 and 91. There are no hydrolo modules for this particular topic. Okay, so your notes from the PowerPoint and Jacaranda and Biozone pages are very important for this particular episode. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next episode of Science.